Welcome to Tough Questions, where we address the most challenging issues of a real and a relative Christian faith. If you're joining us on Facebook Live or our YouTube channel, Instagram, or maybe the Tough Questions podcast, again, I want to say thanks for dialing in. Now let's get into our subject for this episode. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad that you're here with me. We're going to get into session number 2 today of our new series we started last week, titled Rethink. And again, the idea here is to rethink those major choices and decisions that we all have in this life. You know, I'm not talking about the chocolate or vanilla type of choices. I'm talking about the things that make a lasting, a tremendous difference in our life. Our faith is the one that we're going to talk about today, in that our faith is so important that, sometimes we need to think it through or to rethink our faith in order to make sure that we're on a good pathway, we're on a good track, things are going in the right direction, and that our faith in God is continuing to grow and continuing to develop. That's the journey that we're on today. We know that our faith can be one of these things that's it's either growing or it's dying, one or the other. Faith really doesn't, you don't get to a plateau and say, I've arrived. I don't need to do anymore. I don't need to, follow any of the practices that have helped me to grow in my faith. That never materializes. We're either growing or we're dying in faith. We need to continue the journey of knowing God and of following, the call of God on our life. And I think it's a lifelong journey, one that all of us can appreciate. So, our Christian walk is growing or dying. It can be a full-time gig or it can be a part-time thing. I know a lot of people that they do their absolute best to live out their faith in all the different aspects of their life, and that's good. That's the way we should be as Christians. But I also know people that it's more of a part-time thing. I'm going to be a Christian on Sunday morning. I'm going to be a Christian, at the dinner table. I'm going to be a Christian. And I see a homeless person, I'm going to go give them, some money or whatever. But it's not a change of heart. It's not a total way of life. And that's what we need to rethink when it comes to our faith and our faith in God. There was a poet, and the man's name was John Dene, and he kind of summed things up. As we look at this issue of faith in our life, he summed things up regarding our death and how faith kind of interacts with that. He summed it up this way. He says, death comes equally to us all, okay? And it makes us equal in its coming. What's he saying? He's saying that in the face of our mortality, we're all equal. It doesn't make any difference what side of the tracks you're from, or it doesn't make any difference what your socioeconomic status is, or, the number of mistakes you've made in life, or anything else. It doesn't make any difference. What he's saying here is that all people are going to come to the point to where they die. And when they die, what else is there? Norman Greenbaum, what he was singing about was, that point of, the end of life comes, you take that last breath, and what's important is your faith. Have you thought it out? Have you practiced it? Have you followed it? Have you done everything that you can to enhance your understanding of who God is and the sacrifice of His Son on our behalf, and of the relationship that God wants with each one of us? What else is important when you get to that point to where you die? Our founding father, John Wesley, founded Methodism, and his brother Charles was a preacher also and pastor, but a hymn writer, and he wrote many of the hymns that we all enjoy. But one of their congregants was a physician, And he said this to John Wesley. He said, "Most people die for fear of dying, but I never met such people as yours." He says, "None of them are afraid of death, but are calm and patient and resigned to the last." You know, what he was saying was, yeah, we're all equal in the face of death, but when you have that relationship with God, when you have that hope and you hold on to those promises that God has given to us, man, it sure makes going from this life into the next life that much easier, that much better. You know, people don't die for fear. You know, they're not afraid of death because really this life is the beginning. It's not the end, and that's what our faith teaches us. Now, but there are some things, I think, that keep people from developing and following through on having a vibrant Christian faith, you know, a vibrant relationship with God. And today I want to kind of look at a couple of those things because this question of faith is so important, not only to us in our lives, but also all of the people that God has placed in our life. You know, all of these people that God has put in our particular families and extended circles. You know, we are to be witnesses to these individuals, to all people, of the faith that you and I hold. So it's important that we do it right and that we do it well. And then we do it from our heart, that it really, really makes a difference. One of the things that stands in the way of people having that type of a relationship with God, abiding one that's growing, is when they view other Christians that maybe are struggling. Now, I don't know anybody that has got the whole Christian experience, the whole, you know, God-human relationship thing figured out. I don't know anybody. You know, certainly as we go through life and we go through the studies and prayer and all of the things that lead us to God and an understanding of God and in that relationship, yes, we grow and we become stronger in our faith, but I don't know anybody that's got it all figured out. But I do know people that wrestle with their own faith and then they're discouraged because they look at other people that are Christians and see that they're struggling too. You know, that their faith is not abiding, that they're not growing in faith and becoming better and happier and easier and, you know, can outwardly, you know, show the benefits of what's going on. I don't see a whole lot of that either. What I see are sometimes people struggle in their faith and they bring other people down because of the expectations that maybe they had. For those of you that recognize the name Hillsong, Hillsong is an Australian church. It's a mega church in Australia that literally ministers to millions and millions of people around the globe. They have thousands and thousands of people that belong in the church. They have several different music ministries, and they travel around the globe and do stadium ministries and concerts. And, you know, the Hillsong is a big deal when it comes to contemporary Christian faith. And one of the song leaders that is in Hillsong, his name is Marty Sampson. And Marty Sampson has been quite a legend, if you will, when it comes to Hillsong and all that they've been doing, their concerts, their music, their recordings, their witness in those stadium events. Marty Sampson has been a huge part of all of that. You know, usually at the front line, singing and playing his guitar and, again, music that he's written. Well, Marty recently came out on Twitter, I think it was, and he made a statement and said, "I'm walking away from my Christian faith." He's walking away from it. This guy that you and I would have looked at and said, you know, this is one of those, you know, those super Christians. You know, he's got it all figured out. He's making the way. He's out there ministering to thousands and thousands of people. And, you know, Marty, you know, he looks just like the guy that's got it all together. But in reality, he didn't. In reality, Marty says, no, I don't have it all together. And I've struggled with it for a long time. And I'm going to quote from him. This is the quote that he made. And again, I think it was Twitter, but don't hold me to that. He said, "This is my soapbox moment, so here I go." He said, "How many preachers fail?" He says, "Many, and no one talks about it." "How many miracles happen?" "Not many, and no one talks about it." He says, "Why is the Bible full of contradictions and no one talks about it?" He says, "How can God be love and yet send billions of people to a place all because they don't believe?" He says, "No one talks about it." Christians can be the most judgmental people on the planet, he says. They can be also some of the most beautiful and loving people too. But it's not for me anymore. You got to understand, just by what he said there, his quote, Marty was struggling big time with some huge issues in the Christian faith and in his own heart, about why Bible, is it filled with contradictions or is it not? And there's all, we can go through and try and figure out what it is that Marty was struggling with and how it could have been handled. But the point is, during his whole journey of struggling in this faith, as people were looking to him, as an example, they didn't realize that he's just a human too. He's just another person who is faced with the same dilemma that all of us are, the same questioning faith that all of us have. Are those issues in the Bible contradictory? Are they, why does God, create people only, knowing that, many of them are going to go to hell? I mean, all of these massive questions he's wrestling with, and other people that are wrestling with him too look at him and say, well, I guess if old Marty couldn't figure it out, then, who am I? Sometimes people look toward our Christian witness as we struggle with the faith. And we have to be really aware that everything that we do and the way that we react to things and the way that we openly question things and so forth could have an adverse effect on other people. So as a Christian, I need to investigate what's going on in my life and in my questioning heart. But I also have to realize that other people watch, especially my kids. I'll tell you that right now. They don't miss a trick. You want to know who Joe is, you go ask one of my 5 kids and they'll tell you who I am because they've witnessed it. They've seen it. Some people get the wrong impression as a pastor. Well, yeah, you got it all figured out. Well, no, I don't. I don't have it all figured out. I have as many questions and actually more questions than I have answers. But, in my walk of faith, in my questioning of my faith, I want to do it in a way that lets people know that it's okay. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to talk with God and to offer to God those questions and concerns and let God have the responsibility of filling us back up, with the things that we need to know and understand at the right times and in the right way. So our own personal Christian walk sometimes is something that turns people off, turns them off from the Christian faith. Another thing that I've noticed that turns people off when it comes to their investigation or their willingness to get involved with Christianity is the church. You see people and hear people all the time that say, well, I don't need to go to church in order to be a Christian. It's just a place filled with a bunch of hypocrites. Well, they're right on both accounts. The church is filled with hypocrites, and guess what? There's room for you too. The church is a place of, struggle and a place of really some very difficult theology, difficult concepts to believe in and to hold on to. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, if you will. But you see, the Christian church should be a place. It should be a place where me or Marty or whoever, with their questionings and their discussions and their wonderings, can bring all of those things to the church and in an environment that is safe and secure, where no one's going to look down and because you're asking something that maybe they feel comfortable with and you don't, or you question. It should be a place that is safe and secure, so that you're not embarrassed, so that you don't feel like you've been called out, or you don't feel like, because I have these questions, I'm just not, a good person or a good Christian. Marty didn't find all of that in the experiences that he had while he questioned his faith. The church didn't help him to build it back up and to answer those questions. It got him to the point that he walked away. And that's exactly the opposite thing of what any of us want to happen. We want to be able to come into the church and, picture yourself as a disciple, sitting down at the table. You're getting ready to have a meal, and you guys, you're talking about things and think about building each other up and answering those questions. Not that the disciples always did it right. They didn't. They blew it a lot of times. But the church that Jesus calls us to be, is a church that is open for building up one another in our questioning and in our doubts. I think Marty found one that was filled with judgment. It didn't overflow with compassion. And it was a church that really was unequipped to handle the type of questions and things that he had. We have a Tough Questions series. Tough Questions is the name of the outreach ministries that we do here at the church. And they're like this, preaching. They're also, Tough Questions is a Bible study type of ministry where we look at those tough issues of the Christian faith and try and openly discuss them in a very secure fashion. And to do it without being judgmental, to be being confident and to be confidential with people, so that nobody feels like they don't have a place to go to work these things out, or to even just openly talk about things. That's what the church is for, is to build each other up. Jesus was basically saying to us in many different places, he says, you don't ever look down on a brother or sister unless you're looking down to pick them up. And do that in the church. Do that in your own personal life too. Because realize this, people are always watching. And if you don't think that people understand or know that you are a person of faith, I got news for you. People make these judgments and see these things right up front. You're in a restaurant and your meal comes and you, wanting to thank God for that meal, you bow your head and you say a prayer for that meal before you eat. I'll guarantee you there's a half a dozen people in that restaurant that you just witnessed to. And these things happen all the time, not only in our personal lives, in our personal witness, but also in the witness of the overall church that you and I are part of. The scripture that I want to read to you today, and I'm going to ask you to go back and read this on your own this week during your study time. It comes from the book of Hebrews in chapter 3, and it starts with verse 12. And let me read this to you. Be careful then, brothers and sisters. Make sure that your own hearts are not evil and unbelieving. Turning you away from the living God. Let me read that again. Make sure that your own hearts are not evil and unbelieving, turning you away from the living God. You must warn each other every day, while it is still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God. In other words, be there for each other. Reach out to each other. Strengthen each other in faith and walk, consider the journey of faith of other people to be part of your own journey. That's what being a Christian in community is all about. For if we are faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed, we will share in all that belongs to Christ. What's he saying? Hey, he says, be faithful. You remember the vibrancy that you had in your faith walk at the beginning when you first accepted Jesus and life was good because you accepted him and his sacrifice. Don't forget that. Just because the questions get harder and they start to pile on and your doubts and your wonderings start to come, don't lose the faith that you had at the beginning, that vibrancy that was there. Don't lose that. He says, careful then, brothers and sisters, make sure that your own hearts are not evil and unbelieving. Build each other up, turning you away from the living God. You and I are the church. And whether you like it or not, people look at us and they see, what does it mean to be a Christian? Well, is it like Joe? Is it like so-and-so? My thoughts for you this week are that you would continue to grow in your love and your faith and your service of Jesus, and that you would continue to grow as a Christian individually as well as a member of the Christian church. So I want to invite you here next week. Thanks, and God bless. Thank you for joining me. Tough Questions is a teaching ministry of the Rosebush United Methodist Church. Join us on podcast at toughquestions.buzzsprout.com, or you can go to Spotify or Apple Podcast and just search for Tough Questions Joseph Bevan. If you'd like to join us live, you can do that on Facebook Live Sunday mornings at 11:30. Or if you want to check out our video archives, go to our YouTube channel at Rosebush United Methodist Church and just search as one word, and you'll find us. Thanks, and God bless. Tough Questions is a teaching ministry of the Rosebush United Methodist Church. Join us on podcast at toughquestions.buzzsprout.com, or you can go to Spotify